So it's good to hear and see everybody looks fine after the Chagim, which should be a wonderful time. Somebody here posted in the paper a picture of somebody who put on a lot of weight and was trying to blame the Chagim, and the person said, no, you know that's not what the reason is. Anyway, but it's a great time to eat, to sing, to talk, etc., and talk to God. Okay.
We do that every morning.
So, yes, of course, we should. We should.
Sure.
More and more, there's reasons to say Modani when thinking of others, etc., etc. So, since we last met, which seems like so long ago, I've spent time with a variety of personalities. So first of all, in our sukkah, we welcomed, of course, Ushpizin, the guests, our Avotenu, our ancestors, Avram and Sarah and Rivka and Leah and Yitzchak and Yosef and Aaron, Moshe and David.
They were all there.
They were all there. They liked the gefilte fish. I thought Yosef, having been in Egypt, would not have liked the gefilte. I don't know. Okay. And of course, family and friends, and it was wonderful. And I need not tell you that the weather was and still is very appropriate for the sukkah.
Okay.
The second type of personality, and of course the personalities with my friends and the Ushpizin and family, within that, all are different types of personalities, as in everybody's family. Second, I went on a tiyul in Yerushalayim with a friend of mine who came in from Rehovot, and it was in Rechavia, and it really was focused on Yitzchak ben Tzvi's home and personality and character. Anybody remember who Yitzchak ben Tzvi was?
The first president of Israel.
The second president.
Okay.
But, Bev, he was the first to bring the presidency to Yerushalayim. Chaim Weizmann stayed in the Tel Aviv area. And Ben Tzvi thought that it was only appropriate that he be in Yerushalayim. The Australians wouldn't agree, if anybody knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, he was president from 1952 to 1963, and I think that is the longest anyone has been. He was during the time of Ben Gurion, and then, who was the next one? Eshkol? Okay. Anyway, and Ben Gurion was twice. Now, Ben Tzvi, was very modest, and it's still there in part. But what Ben Tzvi also did, and it's been carried on to this day by all the presidents, including Herzog and his wife now, is that he had an open house, an open sukkah for everyone who chose to come and visit. One little anecdote, the guide was terrific. One little anecdote was he showed us the booth that is very worn now, where the guard for the house would sit, inside the shape of a telephone booth. And one night, do you know what that is now anymore, a telephone? It was a cold Jerusalem night, and his wife sent him out wanting to give the shomer, the guard, a bowl of hot soup. So the president goes out to this guard and says, come inside for a bit. My wife, Rachel, wants to give you some soup. And the guard says, but I'm guarding you. And the president said, I'll stay here. I'll stay here. You go. One other, and I think this is all connected to what we'll be talking about, is that apparently, there wasn't the media that we have today. So you don't see the president or the prime minister or the opposition on TV or on Facebook every minute. So it was possible that people did not recognize him. And he was known to go for walks. He's near, for anybody, Rechavia, Karen Kayemet, near Karen Kayemet and Rambam. So he was going for a walk, and somebody came up to him and asked him directions to a certain street, I think Yushiskin. And he gave him the directions. And somebody then went running to the guy who had just asked the president for simple instructions and said, do you know that you just bothered the president with this question of directions? And the guy answered him and said, I had no idea that that's Ben Tzvi. And he goes running back to Ben Tzvi, and he said, I'm so sorry that I bothered you. And Ben Tzvi is said to have answered to him, it's okay. It's my job to give direction to the Jewish people.
Wow.
Yofi.
Perfect answer.
Yeah. And then spent a few hours at the Menachem Begin Center, which I've been at before. And that was a different personality. I still get goosebumps when he talks of Eliza when she died, meeting with Sadat, whatever it is now, and welcoming the Vietnamese, if you remember how he brought that boat of the Vietnamese in. I also was thinking of personalities because I was reading the Jerusalem Post one morning and read an article by Dory Gold. I don't know if anybody is familiar with that name. He has been an advisor to the prime minister. He was for 2 years, even though born American, the ambassador, Israeli ambassador to the United Nations. Now, he's an example of an ordinary person, as all of these people are that I've spoken of, getting involved with something historic, because Dory Gold was a fellow camper with me in Camp Ramah in Connecticut and Boston many, many moons ago. A real person. Now,
I didn't know that.
yes, yeah, he's originally from Connecticut, and camp was near there.
Well,
Now, the second ordinary person is my oldest friend. You know how Bati and I would go to Atlanta, Georgia every Pesach. And that was to be with Leah and Harold Summers for 2 weeks during Pesach. And we had met, Leah and I, also at Camp Ramah when we were 13, 14. So we know each other about 15 years. Okay, I was waiting. Anyway, Harold, originally from England, had lived in Israel for about 12 years. And they've come now for a month. They've been here. 2 reasons. Their son is here for the year, but also there was a 100th year reunion of people who had lived on Beit Alpha, Kibbutz Beit Alpha. And he had been there and worked on the kibbutz. During the 73 war, he woke up that first morning and he didn't know what was going on, but he, like many, served to replace the kibbutz members that had to go off to war. But later on, he himself joined the army. But then when he's back on the kibbutz, one of the leaders of the kibbutz, who had ties with the Mossad, recommended that Harold could be of use to Israel through the Mossad. And he's interviewed, and what was he going to be used for? You remember the terrible tragedy in Munich of the Olympics, the 11.
Who could forget? Who could forget?
Okay. Now, when they're trying to catch the terrorists, they believed and discovered that they're in Lebanon. So they weren't asking Harold to go, but they used his passport for one of the Israelis who went into Lebanon so that he could rent a car, et cetera, et cetera. So in his own way, he was part of something very historic, and they found them and did what was due to them. And one more item about my friends Harold and Leah, which is the reason I went to the Begin Center, showing them around these 6 days, that they were with us, a delight. The other day, they were taking a taxi to Rehov Abba Eben.
Mhm.
We remember him, right? No one more eloquent than him.
Mhm.
So because they were going to visit somebody they hadn't seen in 40 years, because they were going to that street, it reminded them of a story. Several months ago, they decided they need to update their will, Ad 120, and they saw advertised a gathering where you would go and somebody would be giving a pitch, and they go and they're sitting there, and the lawyer who's speaking introduces herself as Stephanie something Eban. So Harold right away wants to ask, and Leah holds him back. But after the pitch, this lawyer makes the rounds to each table. And not sure whether she's one of our tribe, she asked Leah and Harold, why are you here? And Leah intentionally said, well, we're thinking about the future of our children, Aviva and Binyamin. And the woman stopped her right away and said, I'm with you. And then Harold said, and this is in Atlanta, Georgia, are you by any chance? And she stopped him and said, yes, I am married to Abba Eben's grandson. Small world, small world. And to take us into our discussion of visions and dilemmas, yesterday had a wonderful, wonderful few hours in an area known as Binyamin,
Mhm.
where there's a winery, Psagot,
Mhm.
great wine. And why a dilemma? We were invited to a celebration of a bat mitzvah of people very close to us, and was going with Batya, my sister, and one of her daughters. And there have been some shooting incidents not too far away recently. So the people who we're inviting don't live so far from there and are used to going back and forth. And you think twice, not necessarily because of political reasons, not at all, but you're scared, physically scared. But that did not stop us, and thank God. A beautiful simcha. And talking about personalities, I could discuss the beautiful Dvar Torah that the bat mitzvah girl gave, but that's not what struck me. It's that her almost black hat grandfather, who happens to be a good dancer because it was a mixed crowd, did a beautiful dance with his granddaughter. And so all types of personalities gathered at the simcha in the area of Binyamin, and thank God we were able to dance. Now, what is something, and please respond, what is something that's important that a person should have in his or her life? Think of, there are a few things. There really are a few things. But I'd like you to say, without giving any order to them.
A partner in life.
Okay, partner in life. Maod, what else?
Joy.
Joy, very important for a person to have.
Sure.
Good health.
Good health, absolutely.
Contentment.
Faith.
Faith, okay, Michael.
Good friends.
Good friends. Yes,
I was thinking of the Torah, it says one should not live alone. So you have joy and you have all the other things. It's a condition of a partner, of a marriage. Even as with God, we say is a marriage.
okay, yes. There are no rights or wrongs here, people.
Grandchildren, lots of grandchildren.
You got your wish, Shirley Ann.
Hey, goals,
Say that again?
goals, to have some
Goals.
goals.
Okay. And Bev, anybody else?
Yes.
Empathy.
Sorry?
Empathy.
Empathy, okay?
An
Good answer.
adequate amount of money.
Ah, here's the one honest person. Of course, that's not what I'm thinking of, but it's true. And the way you put it, adequate amount. There's so much good you can do with that item.
I'm also thinking the ability to look at the sunny side of life.
Yes, definitely. Not always easy to do, but a must. Anybody else? Okay, for our purposes, Bev gets 3 pieces of the Jerusalem kugel. For in fact, we're talking about also a need for dreaming. And I don't mean when you're sleeping, but a need for a vision. And I would say, if you allow me, Bev, that goals are steps within a vision, a long-term vision. Vision for the future, it's been said, enhances hope and optimism. It goes beyond just thinking about what do I want. It is about serious dreams. By the way, I believe that the task of a teacher and an educator is to be a dream facilitator. And you can think about that. Now, let's share our screen. Okay, so Roshan Bandekar, an Indian Spanish writer and filmmaker, focuses on passion and art and says the following: the purpose of having vision statements for all areas of your life is not just about getting what you want, it's also about living a fully engaged and exciting life. Individuals with no vision have much less energy and passion for life. Why? As human beings, we need direction to feel fulfilled. Where there is no vision, people perish. And you can comment after about this. Technically, visions are not goals. Goals are created, as I mentioned, based on this, from visions. A vision is an active and ongoing dream that you are striving to achieve, whether personally or nationally. I can achieve a weight goal. My vision for my health and wellness never ends. It is ongoing as long as I am alive. And it's suggested you ask yourself these questions. What is your objective in life? What is the objective behind the goals you pursue? What is the objective behind the tasks you do every day? Whatever you do, always bear in mind your end objective. Every time you begin a task, be clear on what the end objective is. Every time you are working on something, evaluate it against your objective. Only by unwavering focus with the end in your mind will you achieve it. Anybody want to react, respond positively, negatively, question anything?
Well, some of one's goals are actually social goals. You derive happiness, for example, what you're doing right now. By giving the class, we all benefit. So the society of your group, we all benefit from your class, but you benefit as well.
Yes, for
So
sure.
we derive
sure I do.
happiness from doing something for ourselves, but also for doing for the society.
Okay. Stan, was your hand up?
Yes, I
Thank
was
you.
thinking of an individual, Theodore Herzl. He had a vision and he used to dream. I was reading about his background. He used to have these very scary dreams about a vision about the Jewish people and about Israel and the formation of a possible state somewhere, which tormented him in many ways. But he was a visionary, and he did have a vision.
For sure.
I was thinking about
Absolutely.
him.
Bracha.
And we
Yes.
will talk more about him next week. Yes.
Okay.
That reading
Yes.
brings to mind Viktor Frankl. And
Yes, Linda. Absolutely. Yeah. Go
he
on.
he said that for your life to have meaning, you had to have goals and visions, and that's what he hung on to. And yeah, so it just recalls it for me.
Absolutely. For sure.
Yeah, and it's even though some of the goals come with a big price.
Well, yes.
You have to struggle to reach a goal.
Absolutely. Nobody's saying that it is easy. To have something that's worthwhile sometimes, yes, Esther, comes with sacrifices, but you've decided that that sacrifice is worth it.
Yeah.
Now, is this easily achieved? So Seth Godin, is that name familiar to anybody?
No.
He's an American author, but he's an internet marketer and apparently the biggest blogger on the internet. And he now likes to refer to himself as a teacher online and through his writings. So he says the following: have we created a $1 trillion multi-million student 16-year schooling cycle to take our best and our brightest and snuff out their dreams? Sometimes when they're so nascent that they haven't been articulated, is the product of our massive schooling industry an endless legion of assistance. The century of dream snuffing has to end. The real shortage we face is dreams and the wherewithal and the will to make them come true. We're facing a significant emergency, one that's not just economic, but cultural as well. The time to act is right now, and the person to do it is you. Can we teach kids to care enough about their dreams that they'll care enough to develop the judgment, skill, and attitude to make them come true? Now, I'll just say one thing about this, and then please. Recently, I had occasion to listen to a few current teachers, and they are complaining that more and more, despite the encouragement of being creative, that's being destroyed by still the need to cover material, to get certain grades, to pass tests, and schools are still concerned with the reputation they'll have based on marks. So there might be individuals in schools that are already beginning to dream. But again, we're not just talking about personal dreams of what I want to be in life, but teachers and educators should be encouraging a passion for many things and not just, taking the steps to be able to earn a salary. Anybody?
Well, I think the teacher's job is really to tease the mind, make them curious to want to dream and develop certain things. And a good teacher will always encourage it.
Yeah. Hopefully that teacher will be able to stand up to the demands, and it's hard to, because you're working for that school, but of course that's what a good teacher will do.
Because very often an opportunity that you didn't think about comes from one of the students.
Absolutely.
And then if you're aware and you run with it and the heck with the curriculum that you have to follow, you have an opportunity to develop something special.
Yeah. Now let me ask, anybody else?
I'm just remembering back to the time when, we had our activities at school, and your goal was to instill a passion in the students so that they would have an emotional connection to Zionism and to Judaism and to everything else. And, we just tried to make sure that, they saw the achievements of Israel and not just the problems there, so that they could have something to look forward to and look up to.
Thank you. Yeah, that definitely was on my agenda. Thank you, Bev. What is now the source or the impetus for an individual creating or identifying with a particular grander dream? Is it something that has to come from within, that you want to attach yourself to a bigger worldly or community dream? Or is it something that's external and it impacts upon you? Now, just to concretize what I'm saying, give you an example. You're familiar with the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim, the Exodus, based on the biblical narrative. Yes, I assume that of everybody here. Can I assume that everybody is also familiar with the wonderful, engaging movie called Prince of Egypt?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, if you haven't, then I was going to say go take it out at Blockbuster, but I'm showing that I haven't been around for a long time because I know that doesn't exist. But it's a wonderful musical some powerful songs and scenes. So, and if you've had a child or a grandchild go to chat, then they probably saw it in their Tanakh class when studying Yetziat Mitzrayim, and their teacher had them watch the movie 3 times for different reasons to find similarities, differences between the biblical story and the movie story. And we know that very often, sure, they are very similar, but there are things that are different. But I highly recommend it. Now, the Exodus, without a doubt, is a focal point of our national history and heritage. The movie and the narrative suggest different rationales for the Jews, the Israelites' march to freedom. The movie's opening scene graphically depicts, and it's an animated movie, depicts the hardships of the Israelites, their slave existence, back-breaking work, and the cruel taskmasters. The movie suggests that the Israelites find strength from within by dreaming of and yearning for the day they will live as free people. The Torah does not leave this episode purely as a human rights story. The Torah asserts the religious element, in other words, beyond wanting freedom. Please mute yourself, somebody. Beyond the move for freedom, the craving for freedom, the Torah makes it absolutely clear that God has a plan, not just to take us out of slavery, but then to build a people. God's plan is the elimination of servitude in order to enable a different type of servitude to God, not slavery, not slavery. Now, which one was it? Was it that what the movie describes, that they're just fed up and it's just from within, we've got to be free? Or was it them remembering the promise made to their ancestors of God's plan?
Bracha, I think
Go
you need
ahead,
to have
Brenda.
both.
Go ahead.
I think
Yofi.
you need to have both, because there are people who are internally motivated, going according to God's plan, but often that internal motivation needs an external force to realize it.
Yes, I agree. Anybody else? Thank you, Brenda. Okay, so let's remind ourselves. We have this vision, we're all familiar, and the Lord said to Abram, Lech lecha, go from your land and from your birthplace, from your father's house to the land that I will show you, and I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will aggrandize your name, and you shall be a blessing. A vision, a promise, a vision. And then we read the story of Jacob. Jacob left Beersheba and he went to Haran. Remember, he's running away. And he arrived at the place and lodged there because the sun had set. And he took some of the stones of the place and placed them at his head. And he lay down in that place. And he dreamed the other kind of dream. And as I believe Stan was suggesting, and behold, a ladder set up on the ground, and its top reached to heaven, and behold, angels of God were ascending and descending upon it. And behold, the Lord was standing over him. And he said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. The land upon which you are lying, to you I will give it, and to your seed. And your seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and you shall gain strength westward and eastward and northward and southward. And through you shall be blessed all the families of the earth, and through your seed. So I bring this as an example of sometimes we have to be reminded of the vision. Now here, vision can have two meanings, and certainly it does here, because he has that vision of the ladder. And that ladder, for me, the most important message is that there is always meant to be a connection between the heavenly, the lofty, and the real, the earth. Then you have the reminder of this vision, because a vision can become a little hazy. So it is brought up again, okay, with Yaakov. Now, the next person I'd like us to look at is the chief rabbi of South Africa, who wrote this, I believe, last year. Yaakov was embarking on a journey, leaving home and venturing out into a hostile world with many dangerous challenges lying in wait. He was fleeing from the vengeful anger of his brother Esau, and his destination was Avram's family, who lived in Haran, a family led by Lavan, a man known for his deceptive and unscrupulous behavior. And so Yaakov encountered many different and difficult challenges throughout his life. But in this week's portion, he is given a gift from God, the gift of a vision, and it sustained him throughout his life. One night on his journey to Haran, he lay down, had the famous prophetic vision we call Jacob's ladder. The ladder rests on the ground and reaches into the heavens, and there are angels ascending and descending. God appears to Yaakov in the vision, promises to look after him on his journey ahead, and to return back to the land of Israel and to his heritage. Now, the commentators on the Chumash share different perspectives on what the ladder and angels going up and down signify. Common to all of them, however, is the idea that the ladder is a bridge between heaven and earth. And this is the great divine vision of the Torah and the mission statement of the Jewish people: to connect heaven and earth, to infuse the physical world with holiness and spirituality, and so to elevate all of creation. Now, this basically repeats what I said, which I'm saying based on this. Now, why did I repeat it? Because as we move along throughout the rest of this session, I want you to keep in mind this dichotomy between the earth and the heaven, and being on that ladder of going back and forth, because that is going to be, if I might use another D, not just a dream or a dilemma, but a disappointment that we are trying to fight currently. So that's why I wanted to repeat that and keep that in mind. Now, we turn to Rivka, with whom many people have a problem. And you all know why. And Isaac prayed to the Lord opposite his wife because she was barren, and the Lord accepted his prayer, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. And the children struggled within her, and she said, "If it be so, why am I like this?" And she went to inquire of the Lord. And the Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two kingdoms will separate from your innards, and one kingdom will become mightier than the other kingdom, and the elder will serve the younger." Now, Rebekah then, after they're born, we all know the story that Yitzchak is about to bless Esau, But Rebekah said to Jacob, her son, having heard that, behold, I have heard your father speaking to Esau, your brother, saying, bring me game and make me tasty foods, and I will eat, and I will bless you before the Lord before my death. And now, my son, hearken to my voice, to what I am commanding you. And his mother said to him, on me is your curse, my son. Only hearken to my voice and go take them for me. She is very well aware. She says she might very well be cursed, and she deserves it. We have a dilemma. She has a dilemma. What is that dilemma?
Favoring one child over the other.
Now, is that the dilemma? Is it a matter of her favoring Yaakov over Esau, or is it something beyond that?
Because she knows the future of the continuation of our people through Yaakov and not through Esau.
Okay. She is aware of the vision, and she has spoken with God, who has told her who will be the one that should continue. You said continuity. But as Esther said, this is also a son. And how can she, what appears to be so easily, deceive him and deceive her husband? But note, and you don't see this elsewhere with our ancestors, how Isaac, when he's praying for his wife to have children, she's right there with him. And she then even talks to God. They were considered to have a wonderful relationship. So the dilemma, we're just giving an example, is when you have, somebody said it earlier, when you have a vision. In this case, she decided that she's willing to sacrifice almost herself, knowing that will her child ever forgive her? Will her husband forgive her for being deceptive? And she goes with the vision. And it's been said, and we've discussed this, so I won't belabor it, that we all know in families that one child, and it's not a matter of superior or inferior, but one is more appropriate for this mission, one more appropriate for that mission, even though in this case it would be difficult because a birthright is involved, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're thinking of the vision, then there is a dilemma, but you gotta make a decision. And she did make her decision. Next example, Aaron, who we think very highly of. We know that he faced a dilemma. He's standing there with the Israelites. When the people saw that Moshe was late in coming down from the mountain, the people gathered against Aaron and they said to him, come on, make us gods that will go before us, because this man Moses, who brought us up from the land of Egypt, we don't know what has become of him. Aaron said to them, remove the golden earrings that are on the ears of your wives, your sons, and your daughters, and bring them, those earrings, to me. And all the people stripped themselves of the golden earrings that were on their ears and brought them to Aaron. He took them from their hands, fashioned it with an engraving tool, and made it into a molten calf, upon which they said, these are your gods, O Israel, who have brought you up from the land of Egypt. When Aaron saw this, he built an altar in front of it, and Aaron proclaimed and said, tomorrow shall be a festival to the Lord. On the next day, they arose early, offered up burnt offerings, and brought peace offerings, and the people sat down to eat and to make drink, and they got up to make merry. Now, what possessed Aharon? Anybody? To do this after they've just been given the first set of laws, why would he have gone along with this?
The Midrash says that he was trying to preserve peace. He was afraid there could be an actual revolution and people killing each other. So this way, he said, when he go to your wives and your children, take off their earrings, he figures they're going to fight, they're going to resist, he'll buy some time. And of course it didn't. So this is what the Midrash says.
Yes, absolutely. Anybody else? And
I find it interesting that the piece of jewelry that is mentioned is the earrings that comes from the ear where they heard the Lord.
Yefeh. And we could talk about other instances where the ear is involved with hearing. Okay, we're going to skip this because Michael just shared this. Rashi also says that, not just the Midrash, that they hurried and did not take the time that he expected as he was trying to stall. The Ramban Nachmanides says the following: what they needed was a new man of God. You can learn from Aaron's excuse to Moshe that it is as I have explained. They said to me, make us a God to lead to us. And Ramban points out he feels they weren't saying not a God to worship, but to lead. All right. He explained to Moshe, as long as you were gone, they needed a guide. If you should return, they would leave him and follow you, as they had done at first. In fact, this is exactly what had happened. As soon as the people saw Moshe, they abandoned the calf contemptuously, letting Moses burn it and grind it to powder without anyone intervening. In fact, they fled from the calf without Moshe saying a word to them. If they had really worshiped the calf, they certainly would not have let Moshe burn it without stoning him to death. An example of a dilemma. Deciding a trade-off, and Aaron was known to do this, trading off truth for making sure there was shalom bayit. Here he was trading off something that seemed an abomination for the unity and keeping people there and secure. Another example of an interesting dilemma. We all know Melech David, and we know all about his behaviors. An interesting guy. On the one hand, he has a husband killed so he can be with his wife. He is a warrior, and that's necessary, but sometimes he had too many people killed. But he's also a psalmist, responsible for our Tehillim. So what's going to be the question? This is really perhaps a dilemma for God. And David assembled all the leaders of Israel, the leaders of the tribes, and the leaders of the divisions who served the king, and the leaders of the thousands, and the leaders of the hundreds, and the officers over all the property, and the livestock of the king, and his sons with the attendants, and the mighty men, and to all the mighty warriors to Jerusalem. And King David rose to his feet and said, listen to me, my brethren and my people. As for me, it is with my heart to build a house of rest for the ark of the covenant of the Lord and for the footstool of our God. And I prepared to build. But God said to me, you shall not, David, build a house in my name, the temple, the Beit HaMikdash, because you are a man of war and you have shed blood. But the Lord God of Israel chose me out of the entire house of my father to become king over Israel forever. For he chose Judah for a ruler, and in Judah, my father's house, and among my father's sons, he desired me to make me reign over all Israel. Very interesting. Here you have somebody who makes Jerusalem our capital. He fights wars that are necessary, fights different types of Goliaths, and he has his bad behaviors. But what about him being a soldier for good reasons? Can it mean the blood based on that fighting that disqualifies him from building the temple? It almost doesn't seem right.
I don't see why not.
Because let's say it was somebody who didn't have a husband killed or didn't kill beyond. Would you say that a soldier or a policeman who's had to kill would not be able to build the temple?
But there is a big difference, Bracha. There's a difference between fighting to save the nation and fight or causing death for personal reason.
No. Okay, that's why I'm saying, let's say, do you think that God is really telling him the blood is just because of the blood of the husband that he sent off? Or is it because he was a general and he fought? I'm asking now, can you have somebody who has blood on his hands, even if it's necessary blood? Can he not qualify for building a holy place? It's an interesting question.
I take it with the pshat because Torah wants to have the temple as a symbol of peace and not of war, even if it's a necessary war. So I prefer the pshat.
Okay, anybody else? I think it's something to be discussed. Okay, but not now. All right. So now, I told you to keep in mind, and why we read twice earlier, about vision and sometimes the disappointment. So classic Judaism vision versus various modern trends. So we're going to read Rabbi Mark D. Angel. Some of you might know of him. Wonderful insights in the various positions that he has held and writes beautifully. So he says the following: the Jewish enterprise then has been both particularistic and universalistic. That is a vision. Yes, we've discussed that our tradition encourages universalism while still being particularistic, and vice versa. And what does he see happening? The Torah and rabbinic tradition have been the guiding forces animating Jewish life over the millennia. The halakha, Jewish law, has been understood by the Jewish people as a divinely bestowed way of life. Through living a life of righteousness based on Torah and halakha, Jews thereby serve as a light unto the nations, or lagoyim. The achievement of this ideal is dependent upon faithfulness to the particular teachings of the Torah, as well as a universalistic vision for the well-being of all humanity. Maintaining this equilibrium is a basic desideratum of Judaism. Yet this vital balance is threatened by various trends in modern Jewish life. On the one hand are those who stress universalism while playing down particularism as much as possible. They advocate Jewish ethics, but denigrate the need to fulfill the specific ritual commandments of the Torah. On the other hand, are those who are devoted to the ceremonial rituals, but who are very little involved with the world at large. They retreat to their own spiritual and physical ghettos, often trying to drive as many wedges as possible between themselves and the rest of society. Both of these approaches represent a deviation from the harmonious balance implicit in classic Judaism. Our ethical teachings are rooted in the mitzvot. An ethical universalism outside the context of observance of the mitzvot is not true to the Jewish religious genius. Likewise, a parochial commitment to rituals without a concern for universalistic ethics is also an aberration. Judaism, emptied of its particularistic mitzvot, is hollow, and Judaism, robbed of its universalistic vision, is cult-like, rather than a world religion. So we have a vision, and there are those who find a dilemma in that I'm scared to let my children go out into the real world. So I'm going to keep them in the ghetto. At this bat mitzvah celebration yesterday, I'm just thinking of this. The grandfather comes in from that part of Binyamin region to teach English at the Hadassah College, the Haredi section. And these are people who are looking now, having finished at yeshivot or maybe continuing, but who want to enter the work community. Okay, now, I'd like to spend just a bit moving from the biblical to the Talmudic era, which means moving from prophet and Kohen priest to everyone. And you'll see what I mean by this. The Talmud teaches us that a wise man is greater than a prophet. Now, before you try to answer why, once the biblical period ends, Nevi'im, prophets, are disappearing in the Second Temple period. And there's a new vision. And that vision is that we should have wise people. And in Hebrew, that would be Talmidei Chachamim. We should have people who are learning. And that is greater than a prophet. Anybody want to suggest why in the Talmudic period that's what they felt?
I would think that a prophet is someone who relays what God wants, whereas a scholar is someone who uses their brain to search into Torah and find out the same thing, what God wants, but this way we have an opportunity to interpret our Torah every single generation for thousands of years. With the prophecy, it's once given and that's it. So I think for us to survive, we need to have wise scholars that can constantly reinterpret Judaism for the time that we're in. And I know we read in the summer, I forget the Parsha, that one line that says, God tells the Jewish people, when you come across a difficult passage, you will go to the leaders of your time. That's huge.
Yes.
To get the right answer.
I think another big difference is that they were in exile now, the Talmud time. They didn't have the Beit HaMikdash. So in order to substitute for that, they needed leaders who were wise and known the Torah. So
beautiful. Esther and Michael. Michael said exactly what I was going to say about the limitations of a Navi, though receiving divine revelation, but exactly, he does what the Almighty tells him to do, has the ability that God grants him. But when you put it in the hands of ordinary people, whether they're the scholars or even the lay people, and that's encouraged, we'll see in a minute, that you have an infinite array of possibilities of how to keep the Torah alive. And Esther also, when they leave behind the period of the temples, there has to be a different focus. And we know that so many of the Kohanim, the priests, failed. Many were corrupt, and they, not out of malevolence, but were overprotective of the rituals in the temple and almost wanted to keep everything holy in the inner sanctum. And that's not ultimately what God was looking for. It was a vision to build the temple, and then that vision changes out of need, but maybe out of a necessary good need. So the problem with the Kohanim, and sometimes the Nevi'im, that they weren't transmitting the Torah to everyone. And that's a problem. So comes along Anshe Knesset Hagdolah, the men of the great assembly. And their vision was to bring the Torah out of the temple into the world of the people. And one of the things that they did is, if we look at our screen, the men of the great assembly enacted blessings and prayers, lo korbanot, not the sacrifices, sanctifications and havdalot, distinctions for Israel. Rav Binyamin Lau, one of the greatest thinkers in Israel and educators, without a blessing or a prayer, we have no stable meeting point with God and are left only with spontaneous overtures at times of grace, of joy, or heaven forbid, of crisis. The men of the great assembly understood that the life of simple people far from the temple, a rural farmer perhaps, had no spiritual dimension or possibility of touching the holy. They saw that only by formalizing the relationship between the individual and his creator would all people have access to their inner spiritual lives. This was a revolution that called upon every Jew to participate actively in the service of God, rather than simply to rely on the knowledge that sacrifices were being offered in the temple on his behalf. Essential. Yes, we have leaders and representatives and shlichei tzibur, but overall it's meant for every one of us to be involved. And one last example, and we have discussed this personality in another context. You want to preserve, but as Michael suggested, you also want to keep it alive. And part of how you keep something alive is by working with it. And let's understand what I mean by working with it. Not watering it down, but making it current, appropriately current. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, we're talking about when the Romans are in Jerusalem and the battles are going on in 69. Finally, after bravery and putting up a good fight, the Romans force the Jews to surrender, and the temple will be destroyed, and Jerusalem will not be what it was. Yochanan ben Zakkai thinks about it, I'm sure, very seriously, that the only chance they have of keeping Judaism alive is for him to sneak out of Jerusalem. And he's known for the famous phrase, "Give me Yavna," and it sages that he would escape and be able to set up another community. For him, that was going to be more important than trying to support Jerusalem or the Beit HaMikdash, because you had to continue learning. For others, that was wrong. I'm sure it was not easy for him, but he knew that you want to keep Judaism going, you need to do something and not just sit there. The rulings of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai recognize the new reality of a post-temple Jewish world. With this, we conclude. These rulings can be divided into two categories: those that were designed to keep the memory of the temple alive, and those that were instituted to adjust to the lack of a temple. Some of the most important of these takanot rulings are: it is permissible to blow the shofar on Shabbat wherever there is a Beit Din. The lulav, secondly, can be carried at Yavna on all 7 days of Sukkot, including Shabbat. Now, let's try to understand why. What's the significance of these rulings?
Did it have an eruv?
But that's not because we have Eruvim today also. So that can't be the reason. Yochanan ben Zakkai, by transferring to the Jewish courts practices that had previously been the prerogative of the temple, made an important statement. See, he was saying life is going to go on, and just because we don't have the Beit Mikdash doesn't mean we're not going to have new judgments to make and decisions.
Okay.
He proclaimed that the central authority associated with the temple was now transferred to wherever the leadership of the Jews had its center, to every place where there is a Beit Din, a court. While today we do not blow the shofar on Shabbat or carry the lulav on Shabbat, at that time, it was imperative for the survival of Judaism to establish it in a new form without a temple. And that was thinking psychologically of the Jews who needed to feel that not everything was gone. They needed to rely on leaders. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's goal was to alleviate the sense of loss, and thus that year, when Rosh Hashanah fell on Shabbat, he instructed the people to sound the shofar in Yavne. It was nothing short of revolution. Rabbi Benny Lau, the Lau that we just read a moment ago, commented that the picture that emerges from Rabbi Yochanan's decrees is that of a leader who refashioned the character of Judaism in the wake of the destruction. It would be impossible to imagine Jewish life today without his bold legislative enactments, which preserved the memory of the temple while allowing Judaism to persevere in its absence. So we have looked at the need for visions. We agree that there are times that it's difficult to decide which way to go. But like the Arava that we beat on the floor on Hoshana Rabbah, one of the best midrashim is you beat that to the ground, but the branch still survives. And we go through all these times and these dilemmas, and we always survive. Now, just to throw out one more thing. We have said in the past that God is a paradigm for our behaviors. So that must mean that he faced dilemmas. What do you think has been God's greatest dilemma?
Forgiving people for their sins.
Okay.
Giving people free will. He wants them to behave a certain way, but he gives them the free will. They can decide against him.
Okay.
Judgment or mercy?
Okay. Good. Anybody else? You might even want to be specific. When I first thought of this question a few hours ago, I said, yeah, that's a good way to end. I had something very specific in mind.
How about in Gan Eden, when Adam had the choice of eating or not eating from the tree?
Okay, well, that relates to the free choice.
I think his dilemma might just be disappointment in how the world is or has in many ways, that he had trust and that the trust.
Okay, well, I
necessarily-
think, yeah, that was a question and debated, would it have been better for man not to have been created? But now that he is created, and yeah, do I trust his dilemma when he promised that I won't have the flood again, I won't destroy? Gee, am I the only one who's thinking of a poor soul, but God had to follow through? Moshe.
Yeah. And his not being able to go into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
We just
maybe
talked
he
about
had
that,
to
yeah.
retire and not be the leader anymore. Yes, it was time for Yoshua to take over, but still he couldn't have let him into this land. I pray, God, that you had a problem with that.
But
By
Bracha,
being
Yeah,
struck
actually,
lightning, but-
that came up at a discussion on Sunday night, actually at Shirley Ann's house, about the
Go
fact that
ahead.
Moshe wasn't allowed into, and why, like, what could some of those reasons have been? This great leader who didn't get to see his dream fulfilled, etc.
but
Well, the
Bracha,
most common reason given is usually that it was important for God that as Bnei Israel were about to enter their own land, they knew that discipline was important.
but
And
Bracha-
even that little small thing that he hit the rock instead of talking to it, harsh, but we have high expectations of our leaders.
but Bracha, you
I don't
can-
know why, but we,
Bracha, you can still have a problem with Abraham too. God gave him a vision, I will give you this land. Yet when Sarah dies, he has to buy a piece of land. And all his life was hard. There was the famine, twice he almost died, and Sarah had to say that she's his sister. So here you have, and the same, all the fathers, they did not have it easy, despite
No.
the vision.
yeah, this is just the one that struck me. But of course, he pushed Avram to do something beyond that we all have a problem with, even
He
though
didn't have
there's a
children.
way to understand it.
And even, even Ishmael, he had at an old age.
Yes, that he allowed Sarah to kick him out. So life isn't just happy Sukkot
Now, can I just, Bracha, before you end this, I just want to go back to the last paragraph that you read about Yavna and the shofar being blown, etc. So
Yes.
while you were reading it, I was actually thinking of your father, who when the Yom Kippur War broke out on Yom Kippur Day, at just before we started, just before we started the afternoon service, he marched around with the talit open and asked people to just put money into the talit to support the Israel and that war effort. And I'll never forget that, because that to me was also like doing something that under any other circumstance he would never have done.
Absolutely. A beautiful example. I think he also, this was way before women had any types of rights in your synagogue.
That's for sure.
Synagogue. Didn't he give in honor of Golda Meir and Aliyah to Gail Sandler?
I think he did, yes. Yeah, but you're saying it, yes. Yep, you're right,
Yep.
100% right. Yeah.
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 A wonderful way to end.
Anyway, that's a good way to end.
Okay, all right. So even though the Chagim are finished, you can v'samachta b'chol yom. Be happy with every day, with every day.
Bye to all.
Okay.
L'kulam.
We say Ashrei every day, which is Ashrei, which
Amen.
is happiness.
Yes. Okay. Take care.